in terms of the other examples you looked at, what tends to be the response from ratings agencies to something like implementing a national minimum wage? Let's say in a hypothetical situation where it is a conservative one, it's not overambitious, it's not kind of abnormal or implausible, it's a measured, fair national minimum wage.
Well, some of the best investment grade countries in the world have national minimum wages. The USA, UK, Germany has minimum wages. New Zealand, Australia, the Scandinavian countries. So and they've got relatively very high minimum wages.
Which is probably informed by the kind of social and political context and the
Yes,
economic
well,
buoyancy of those places.
Yes, but in the developing world, we can look at countries like Argentina has been picking up in the past while. They've got a very social-orientated policy framework, and of which a minimum wage is an integral part. Brazil, until their recent collapse, did relatively well in that. And Chile is another great example.
Okay.
And I need to just add, in the South African context, where we've seen increases in minimum wages recently, the only sector where we saw employment decrease was the agricultural sector. So that gives you a flag. Say, okay, wait, this might be an outlier or somewhere where we need it, especially your tradable sectors, because we need to compete internationally. How much is your wage input into your total input costs? Is sending up a minimum wage by 10% going to make a massive input cost increase and make it inefficient to produce in those sectors, or is it not?
Yeah.
And those are the kind of studies we still need to do. But I want to highlight again, it's one out of the 7 sectors. Forestry, textiles, we didn't see massive unemployment losses.
Sure. Interesting you say that. Terry Bell from Fin24 was here yesterday with a number of interviewees about the budget speech. And the issue of labour came up and the issue of wages in labour. And one of the things he asked Irvin Jim was about consolidating a new workers' party or a new workers' coalition. With your essay and your budget proposal in mind, what do you think would happen with a new workers' coalition around national minimum wage? Is it something they're likely to kind of push and lobby?
They will definitely push it, but the new Labour Federation, if it would be able to form, it would be formed on the left, political left of Kusati. It would be a more, radical is a very strong word, it would be a a more aggressive policy stance, I believe. They would push for very high minimum wages, I would believe. Kusati is already pushing for, it can be a bargaining tool, but they're already pushing for a very high minimum wage.
Yeah.
But sometimes on the other hand, we see people pushing for too low of a minimum wage. It's not academics in this country, be it at UCT or WITS, we have major research initiatives there as well. They'll tell you that the question is not, in academia at least, it's not if, it's where.
And how much?
Yeah, where do we set that minimum wage, and do we make it a single system, a two-tier system, but also the general consensus is we need to simplify.
Yeah. You said now is probably not the best time, hypothetically, to implement a national minimum wage, but in an interview yesterday, Terry Bell discussed with SACTU, the fabric industry union, he asked about the economy and the exchange rate. Because South Africa's currency is quite low at the moment, he argued we're potentially more competitive because our labour costs less in relation to other countries. So does that have any bearing on the timing of implementing a national minimum wage, or not really?
That's an interesting question. It depends, again, on how wage intensive a specific sector will be.
Yeah.
Because wage competitiveness doesn't help at all if it's a capital intensive sector. So that's the kind of thing you would have to look at. But broadly speaking, yes, it would be a benefit.
But you'd have to research what kinds of goods this industry produces and how much
Yes.
labour is a part of that.
Yeah, and how much of the input cost is wages? Because to give an example, our textile sector has historically been struggling. It's been picking up in the past while. In the minimum wage debate in the textile sector, we've been very careful because we say it's a big input cost. But Turkey comparatively has a lot higher minimum wage in the textile sector, but they've been outperforming us. So the question then becomes, what else? What else is there that makes you competitive? How is your infrastructure?
Are there tariffs, for example? Is it because of local?
Yes, it is. It's a much broader consideration than all of a sudden.
Yeah.
So it's about taking a sector specifically and taking into account what is the input cost in that sector and what makes it competitive, and where do we have competitive advantage? Do we have competitive advantage? And like in textiles, are we trying to export over the wider geography of the world, or are we taking benefit of our local markets, especially in the rest of Africa.
So a regional kind of
Yeah.
sub-Saharan potentially markets.
Where our exporting costs would be so much lower if the infrastructure was correct.